What I'm looking for in a bank is one that's looking out for me, like NBT. I want a relationship and a team that supports me in my dreams. And when life gets challenging, I need a bank that's focused on what matters. Not to mention one that's been top rated by Forbes in trust, customer service, financial advice, and more. That's why when it comes to meeting my banking needs, it's always NBT. Learn more at nbtbank.com. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Thanks for tuning in. This is Tom Hickey from 2020 Media, and you are listening to On the Scene podcast made possible by NBT Bank. We thank them for being our sponsor, and we encourage all of you to pop in and see them if you have not already, either virtually online or they have a brand new office in West Hartford Center on Main Street. You can pop in there and say hello. But special thanks to the team at NBT Bank for being our sponsor and making On the Scene podcast possible. I would like to introduce my partner in crime for the podcast, Bob Carr, who's with us. I think, Bob, almost every episode, right?
I missed one episode.
Uh-oh, one episode, okay.
You and Hillary did one without me.
Oh, all right. Okay. How'd that happen?
It's early on. That's what Tom failed to mention, that we reach about 250,000 readers monthly between the products that are represented here, West Hartford Magazine, Connecticut Jewish Ledger, and WeHide.com. So Tom, along with myself, Kosta McCarty, and Ronnie Newton are all founders and partners in WeHide.com. Tom's company, 2020 Media, brings to West Hartford Magazine, Connecticut Jewish Ledger, the Best of West Hartford. Our 10th anniversary is coming up with that, plus numerous fun events throughout the year. Our podcast is assembled and posted by the Modern Observer Group, Middletown, Connecticut. And our guest today is Bob. Let me get this right. Laraia.
Like Mariah Carey.
Oh, that's always easy.
That's all right.
All right. And Bob is I think it's right, 1985 graduate of CCSU. Looks like you started in financial planning right out of college. You founded Northstar Wealth Partners in 2010. You volunteered for numerous organizations, nonprofit organizations throughout West Hartford and the area. You have a Dime Bank affiliation, and I'd like to start off, if we can, just kind of chat a little bit about the nonprofit work that you do. I read that was quite a bit on there. I saw on that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we try to give back to the community. I mean, I'm a Connecticut resident, born and raised, so those things that are close, near and dear to my heart. Lived in West Hartford for almost 20 years until recently. So yeah, we try to spread ourselves pretty thin when it comes to doing that. Some of the things are close to the heart. Obviously, I do some stuff with CCSU, which is my alma mater, and then obviously a lot of the local foundations, charities. We try to touch them as much as we can.
Bob, one of the things, or both Bobs, one of the things I noticed about the nonprofits too, and Bob Laraia, I'm sorry for doing this, but I always do this because we knew each other, from the very beginning of all things in West Hartford, that we started. And thank you for being so supportive of us all these years. But I always forget that, West Hartford, maybe it all started here, but West Hartford, it's not all about West Hartford.
Sure.
That you have a regional presence. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of our clients, they are centrally located. You put like a, pin on West Hartford and draw about a 50-mile radius. Most of them originated from that area. I would say our specialty is we work with a lot of corporate execs, municipal, state employees, et cetera. And, in some cases, they're transient. So, we have clients, I don't know about all 50 states, but pretty close to it. A lot of them we met, when we're doing a gig in West Hartford or around the area, and they've since moved on to different places. So it's, we've sort of grown exponentially for that reason. Where, we try to be there for the clients. We like, a lot of them want to keep us as their advisor. And, there's a couple little things which we'll talk about where I think our ability to work with someone who, let's say, wants to do the snowbird thing, because we're set up to work remotely. We'd like to think they don't feel any difference. So, but West Hartford's our home. That's where it all began.
Yeah. It's funny about too, because I would say, Bob Carr, you'd probably agree, prior to the pandemic, remember that back in 2020 when we were all going away for 2 weeks,
Yeah.
going home for 2 weeks. But it sort of forced everyone, to be remote and and make that work. But one of the things that we found, and you probably knew this well before us, yes, West Hartford is very important, and things are sort of West Hartford centric, a little bit,
Sure.
but a lot of it is about what's going on, and sort of people having an interest in what's happening in West Hartford or a desire to be in West Hartford. So even though some of these people have moved away, like you said, they come back.
Absolutely.
So.
Yep. Totally true. Yeah. Just to touch on that, I mean, our industry was probably on the cutting edge of trying to be paperless, going remote, the various, um, organizations that monitor us, the SEC, FINRA, they were really pushing long before the pandemic to basically become as paperless as possible, up in the cloud, so things are more secure. So we honestly had a head start, and all of a sudden March of 2020 hit. We're like, all right, we pay for all this technology. Let's see if it works. And I don't want to sound like that person because God knows the pandemic was awful. But for us in our industry and Northstar in particular, it gave the clients the feel, everyone had to work remotely then. They had no choice. Now that we've come out of that, we find a lot of them, especially those that have moved away, they got used to the whole Zoom thing. They got used to this. They didn't feel any different. So, whether they're sitting in West Hartford or they're sitting in the villages in Florida for a month or two, for them, it's no different experience. And, we eat our own cooking. I mean, our team is set up all over the country. So that I think has been helpful for people because, there was so much uncertainty and, so much chaos. To have that stability, at least, okay, the financial advisors we're working with, it's kind of the same experience. Nothing has changed. We can get them. We can do whatever. And in some cases, it actually creates efficiency, whether it's just not having physical, real estate or, I have a huge biz hub in our West Hartford office. The thing is barely used now because now we're doing Zoom calls. Okay, you share your screen, PDF it, send it to them securely, and no one ever just, used the whole forest to print on it. So I think it's been a very unique time in our industry to be able to continue to work with people and try to create, a little certainty in what was a really uncertain time.
So do you find that because, I think being a financial planner or in the financial wealth management, that because of that, people don't want to actually change you guys too often, right? You don't want to switch who's your financial planner. So it makes it easier with these technologies.
Yep. I would say absolutely. I mean, look, for 2 years, we had to do it this way regardless. So I think that the clients that, and I'm a business person, if things weren't that way, they may have moved somewhere else, wanted someone where they could go and kick the tires and be local. But for 2 years, we work with them. Everything's great. There's a cohesiveness there. It just gave them a sense of security. It's like, all right, well, whether I'm wherever I am, I can access these people and work with them. And in some ways, like I said, from an efficiency standpoint, it actually, became easier for them to work with us.
You find that, I mean, this is a personal question, but this is for me, because I'm not from Connecticut originally, I'm not provincial. I find myself as not being provincial. So our financial advisor is someone I've known for decades, and he lives in Philadelphia. He's lived in Philadelphia I haven't been, I've never, other than meeting him at reunions, I don't see the guy ever, right? So it never mattered to me where my financial advisor was. That was 15 years ago. But I found being a salesman in Connecticut, once you moved outside the area, people are like, whoa, you're printing in New York City or you're printing in Maine. I have to have somebody local. I'm like, what difference does it make as long as but I found that to be much more true here than from where I grew up.
That's true. I mean, I think that, look, Connecticut is a place where people, they're born and raised there. It's a great place to raise a family. In some cases they leave, but they tend to gravitate and come back. So I think you're right. It may be a little bit more provincial than other places where there's a little bit more transient stuff going on. But I think that, what I explained earlier really has helped sort of soften that a little bit for people. I mentioned I have corporate execs as clients. Some of those I've taken on during the pandemic. And again, I started, like you had said, right out of college. I mean, go out, pull the file, get someone a cup of coffee. They come into the office, wear a suit every day. So that was my world for 20 something years. And, I almost laugh because there's a couple of folks that I took on as clients during the pandemic, and they live locally right near our West Hartford office. I have offered many times. I've yet to shake their hand. But again, let me give you the backstory of the type of people these are. These are high-level corporate execs that have probably hired 200 or 300 people over the last 5 years, and they probably have met 10% of them.
Right.
So for them, that's the world they know it. But you're right. I think it's an acquired thing. It doesn't work for everyone. But I think it really changed people's mindsets, and again, it gave them a little bit of a sense of security, knowing that they could continue to keep those relationships. And, if the guy you're working with is doing a good job and he's responsive and he's following up and his staff is there for you, it doesn't matter where he is.
Right. Absolutely. So one thing I did notice on your website is affiliation with Dime Bank. So is that a situation where you have people sitting at a bank or going on a weekly basis, or?
So yeah, let me give you a really quick backstory a little bit. So as Tom mentioned, I started right out of college. I was actually licensed in college, which now is customary. Back then, I just got lucky and someone approached me while I was in my senior year at Central. I started 20 years with a captive insurance company, broker dealer. They were great. They're a great company. But as I started to really grow my career and my team within this group, we were trying to do financial planning. This was more insurance based. We didn't like the fact that, it was one company and it wasn't independent. So, back when we really started to form Northstar, we went on a due diligence hunt to really find a place we could land where we could offer comprehensive independent advice. We are affiliated with LPL Financial. They're not a retail brand, but they are 25,000 financial advisors. They're as big as Fidelity. They're as big as Merrill Lynch. But you don't know them as a retail brand because most companies like ours brand as their own thing because of the independence and the flexibility they give us. Kind of where, getting back to the Dime Bank question, a few years back, we were approached by LPL. We have pretty decent routes on the Connecticut shoreline into Rhode Island, well branded down there. The folks at Dime had a great financial planning, group in there, but they really were looking to outsource it. They wanted to keep it. It was valuable, but they honestly wanted to just be a bank. There's a lot of opportunity for them because, now with all the contraction, being a small mutual bank, there's a lot of growth potential there, as you've seen them do lately. But at the same time, they wanted to basically just say, okay, we want to keep this, but we want, somewhat of a one-dimensional relationship. So, through LPL, we were approached, and, after about a year of kind of going back and forth and coming up with the fine print, we've taken on a strategic relationship with them. So, if someone goes into the bank, they want to do something and maybe fund an IRA, or they want to roll over a 401k or do something that has to do with financial services. One of our team, he handles that relationship, and, the referral goes to him and off it goes. So it's been great. It's great seeing them. I mean, synergistically, we're very similar, have kind of the same views. And I think they liked the fact that they were able to retain these clients. So the people that were part of that didn't feel like they were being pushed away. And, it's worked out really well for us. So we're actually right now trying to fill another role because, it's done so well that we're kind of at capacity. It doesn't mean we don't want new clients, but we're actually in the process of trying to find another advisor to come in and maybe work. They're starting to move into Hartford County, work the more local Hartford market versus down in New London and Rhode Island.
Mm-hmm. Did you know him from Rhode Island, Bob?
No, I think I knew Dime Bank from Wallingford, right? They're in Wallingford.
There's a couple of Dime names out there. The one that we're affiliated with, their home office is in Norwich, Connecticut. Again, they were really New London County into Rhode Island, and then as of recently they've put 3 offices in Hartford County: Vernon, Glastonbury, and I'll think of the other location, but
it's probably Norwich. It was actually,
I mean, they're growing.
I worked in Norwich for a number of years, and I drive through it all the time. So it's probably Norwich I was thinking of.
Yep, that's their home office there.
Okay, gotcha.
And Manchester's the 3rd location that and 2 of those they opened literally in the middle of the pandemic. So there was no walk-ins; it was drive-through only. And my understanding is they've been very successful. So,
they're a savings bank, right? Is that correct?
Correct. Yes. Mutual savings, mutual as opposed to stock based. So they're kind of the place that we all used to have a lot of those. That are very few of them around, where you can put in a loan application, and all of a sudden someone's sitting down that you happen to know on a Friday and making a decision whether they're going to approve it or not. So as opposed to it getting kicked up to some corporate office.
Yep. All right. So Tom, I don't know if you have, I had a couple other questions.
Go for it. I have one, but I'll wait. It's fine.
Yeah. So, I mean, starting the financial, so if you're out there as a person with, say, $100,000 and they want to start talking to someone like yourself, is that enough money to start talking with someone like yourself? Or do you need, a larger portfolio? And do you have like recommendations if someone doesn't have the portfolio that you guys want to manage, where they should go for their information?
So I think that, really it kind of comes down to the question is, do we have a minimum size client? And long ago, I made the decision that I wasn't going to establish that. And I think if I look back, someone just asked me this question in a social setting. And, if I look at some of my wealthiest clients now, they weren't wealthy when I met them. Mm-hmm. And I know there's other firms out there, if you don't have $500,000, they don't want to talk to you. It's just a business decision. Does it mean that we probably put more work and more time into those smaller clients because they just don't generate the revenue? Of course. But if you're looking for a long-term relationship, I think, it doesn't work for everyone. For us, it's worked out really well. And some of those people, especially when you look at the corporate execs, their trajectory is like this. So, that same person with $100,000, 5 years later, there may be another zero at the end of that, or more. So I think, we do comprehensive planning when it's appropriate. That means that we use a specific software where we build a financial plan for people. A lot of the people that are kind of taking advantage of that opportunity for us are a little bit older. They're looking for, I got this over here, I got that, I got my new 401k, my old 401k, maybe I have an old defined benefit pension that I have some questions about that I need to make some decisions on, and kind of like, what does it all mean? In some cases, they're worried that there might be, they may have an involuntary retirement if they're, someone comes calling and says, okay, there's going to be some contraction at their company. In other cases, they want to know, okay, I'm 62 now, I'd like to leave by 64. Can I afford to do it? Is there a shortfall there? So that type of planning sometimes doesn't necessarily involve the assets. It's more about the actual planning side of it.
Interesting.
Another question was, just what mistakes that you see people make that, just in general, that they don't do, that, that easy things that you say, you should make sure you have a will, et cetera. Is there things that fall into that category?
Yeah. I think, a lot of times, look, we take on clients that have worked with someone else in the past. And, maybe they've been unhappy with their old advisor or even the investments that their advisor had them in. More likely, it's not necessarily the investments or even the advisor, but it was, I'll use an analogy. There's a screw in the wall and someone's got a hammer and they're trying to get it in. It's not necessarily the screw's fault. It's they're using the wrong tool. So I think a lot of times it's making sure that the client's goals, wishes, risk tolerance are lined up with what they have, and then monitoring those things as they change. That means internal factors like, hey, I just lost my job. Chances are we should probably look at your portfolio and, probably, safeten it up a little bit. Vice versa, I just got this huge promotion. I've got extra money. I think I'm going to work longer than I said. So I think a lot of that is, internal factors and monitoring those things. And then external factors of, what's going on in the world. There's been a very, even 2022 was a year where, I used to teach an investment class for years until I became a dad and I just couldn't do it at night anymore. And we used to talk about stocks and bonds and how they correlate with each other. And, the stocks go up, bonds go down and vice versa. Well, 2022 was like this. It was basically halfway through the year, the US bond market was down as much as the Dow. I was taught that's not supposed to happen, defying the laws of gravity. So, making sure those people are focusing on a year like that year and doing things, in a year where we didn't really expect it. No one, a global pandemic, same kind of thing. So I think it's some of that is really just, monitoring things and watching things and then making sure, again, the risk tolerance is right with what they have.
Right. And just before I forget, Bob, for you, if people want to talk to you, how do they reach you?
So you can, we've got on our website, it's northstarwealthpartners.com. They can reach us through there. And, all my information is online. They can go there. They've got, our bios and all that good stuff.
I saw that. So if they were going to your website and clicked on your headshot as an example, it would take you to your email or whatever.
There's an info and then, they can, reach out to us. We've got someone that monitors that email. We'll set up a complimentary consultation. It can be personal and it could be in person. It could be Zoom, most to Zoom. And we can just meet them. I think we're always going to give someone an hour of our time just to make sure that it's a good fit, for not only their sake, but our sake. And then, so that's really the best way to get a hold of us. My personal email is on the website too. You can always email me directly. And we've got 4 offices now, so we're pretty geographically set up so that, regardless of where we are in the state, someone can come to us within a, 15, 20-mile radius.
Absolutely.
You got a very clean website. I was on there earlier today. So let's say whoever set up your website did a really nice job. So
thank you. I've got it. Yeah. If you ask me, like, other than like hiring him and writing the check, I'm like, okay, that's about, but yeah, we're pretty happy with it. I mean, it flows well. Obviously we got the nautical theme. I'm a boater, so a little bit near and dear to my heart, but, so.
cool. So I just a couple more things here. I mean, so, how do you feel about, just general terms, the advice that is thrown out there by like a Dave Ramsey or a Susie Orman, because they kind of play in your space, but they're not personal, right?
Yeah. It's a hard thing because, I understand, look, they're very successful people. They've done very well for themselves. And overall, they've probably given good generic advice. But what I find is our world is very, very ungeneric. So big question that comes up with some of my older folks is, when do I take Social Security? And it's hard to write a book about that says this is when you should do it, because there are so many factors in that. What's your health like? Do you have a spouse? I could go through the whole list. So I think that a lot of the people that are kind of generalizing things out there, you got to be a little careful with, because you may read something and it may be appropriate for 80% of the people. But if you fall into that 20% that it's not, you might be going down the wrong path. So, I think, it's like anything else. I mean, I hate to use the analogy, but if you do, you're one of a sports gambler or something like that, a lot of times, you hear about the wins, but, 3 out of 5 times they're wrong, not right. So I think it's some of that stuff you got to be a little careful with. I mean, the internet is amazing when it comes to information, but it can also cripple you. So I think you got to kind of read everything with a grain of salt. And I think, at some point, obviously this sounds self-serving, but if someone really gets to know you, they're going to be able to give you much more personalized advice that may or may not be what you're reading about from one of those 2 people. So that, that's kind of how we take it. We don't mind that the clients go out there and read that. And I get emails all the time. Oh, I read this, or what about that? Or, and there's always the flavor of the month out there, whether it's crypto or AI or, it kind of comes around. So I think, but I think it's always important to make sure that, does it really work with you personally? Does it make sense for you?
And I think, if you don't mind, one of my questions, Bob, was too about, lately it seems as though all these direct mail invitations are coming. They almost look like a party, invitation, and they're always like, oh, come dine at Fleming's or Capitol Grill. It's always like some, and then you realize, oh my gosh, this is just some, as I would say, some, nonsense, whatever to get you to fill a seat.
Yep. I mean,
that happens too, right?
If you look at, the statistics on this country, a lot of people are going to retire in the next 10 years. Some of them, most of them, have really never sought out guidance. There's a ton of opportunity out there. So I think that, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't take advantage of those things. I mean, go into it with eyes wide open, if there's no free lunch, I didn't make that phrase up. But at the end of the day, if they're good quality people, and the reality is you should really talk to someone. And, going back to the comment you made, Bob, where it gives you a little nudge to maybe get your wills done or reviewed again, it's not necessarily a bad thing. So, it takes look, we get referrals all the time. Someone will come in and they're very adamant about, along with other things, working with an attorney along with us to get their estate plan done. 9 times out of 10, something happened in their past, relatively recent, whether they were an executor of an estate that was a mess, or someone passed away, or someone had a terrible illness that was unexpected, so you kind of don't want to be that person, and if you do, it creates more stress because now you're like, oh, I got to get this done right away. So I think it's not always a bad thing.
Good point. Excellent. Anything else, Bob Carr?
No, that was excellent, Bob. I really appreciate everything you had to say there.
I think what you were saying too earlier, Bob Carr, if people would spend, and good plug for you, Bob, but people would spend 5 minutes, on your website. I mean, there's a wealth of information, and knowledge, and I think really would make people feel comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Put the website out there, Bob. Why don't you read it off and give us your website address?
So again, it's www.nstarwp.com.
Right. And on Bob, to remind everyone, is an info button so that someone can reach out to them, or they can get your direct email address from there as well.
And my email, just again, is rlaraia@nstarwp.com.
Beautiful. All right. Very good. Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to throw another little commercial in here before we call it quits on our financial discussion. Oh, and I should also note, too, for anyone who doesn't know, but hopefully they do. I don't know for how many years, but Bob has been writing our finance column for West Hartford Magazine for, I don't know. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary this coming fall. So maybe it's been almost the whole time. I don't know.
I know it was we were right there at the beginning stages. And again, just to say this, love what you're doing in West Hartford, love the partnership, with the Jewish community, and just some of the things you guys are doing are great. I mean, we obviously, we work in other towns too. And I just think that West Hartford really, they're doing it right. So, chamber, the whole thing is really, it's been great. So we're excited to keep doing it and working with you.
Great. Well, the feeling is mutual. We love working with you guys as well. So on that note, this has been Tom Hickey and Bob Carr, and thank you for tuning in to On the Scene podcast, brought to you by NBT Bank. And again, since I forgot to say it in the beginning, but Bob reminded me, we reach over 250,000. That's 250,000 people through all of our platforms, Jewish Ledger, West Hartford Magazine, and weha.com. So please reach out to Bob Laraia if you have any questions. He'll be a great resource, for you. Or in the month of April, I guess, you can go online anytime to either WeHa Magazine or West Hartford Magazine and check out the finance column, and you'll see a whole bunch of different topics that Bob has addressed over the years. But in the meantime, support not only NBT Bank, but today's guest, Bob Laraia at Northstar Wealth Partners.
Bob, Tom, thank you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having us.
What I'm looking for in a bank is one that's looking out for me, like NBT. I want a relationship and a team that supports me in my dreams. And when life gets challenging, I need a bank that's focused on what matters. Not to mention one that's been top-rated by Forbes in trust, customer service, financial advice, and more. That's why when it comes to meeting my banking needs, it's always NBT. Learn more at nbtbank.com. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.